Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he hopes to announce the release of all hostages from Gaza in the coming days as Israel, the US and Hamas prepare for indirect talks in Egypt tomorrow on Donald Trump's plan to end the war. Joining us now is Executive Manager at Australia, Israel and Jewish Affairs Council, Joel Burnie. Joel, nice to catch up again. Thanks for your time. Is there cautious optimism? I mean, this whole peace plan relies on doing a deal with the devil and for Hamas to essentially lay down its arms. Is it too good to be true right now? What's your response?
Well, thank you both for having me on, and it's a very good question. And unfortunately, I'd love to have the answers, but I, like everyone else, are waiting. Since the announcement yesterday morning our time that Hamas had agreed to certain conditions inside the Trump peace plan that was announced last Monday, Australia time. The optimism is that we hope that in the coming days, all hostages will be released. Now, that's only part of the plan. The Israelis were asked to cease activities in Gaza City, which they've done. And as you noted in your introduction, all the right people are frantically flying into Cairo right now to start negotiations to solidify the details of the deal. Now, I'll note that the atmosphere in Israel is very, very cautious optimism. There's nothing more than the Israeli people would want to have the hostages back and an end to this war. And they're hopeful that in the coming days, there'll be positive news. But look, the devil is in the detail. Hamas is a genocidal death cult that will do everything in its power to delay the implementation of other parts of the plan. So my expectation is, and I hope that I'm wrong, but my expectation is that this is a very clear yes, but by Hamas, and more emphasis on the but than on the yes. So I think that for Hamas to release the hostages is one thing, but to get it done by the 72-hour deadline is unlikely. And then the two other things that need to come into play, that's the transitional government, where Hamas is to play no role, the demilitarization, the laying down of their arms. These are the type of things that I do question whether or not Hamas is genuinely ready to do.
Well, one of the things you mentioned there, Joel, is the next stage in the governance of Palestine. And as I understand it, Hamas have said they expect to play a role in that, which is a major red line for Israel, I would have thought. So that one point in and of itself makes me dubious as to whether any deal can get done and indeed should get done by Israel. Surely they can't agree to those terms, even if it means that hostages aren't released.
And you're 100% correct, and your analysis is spot on. So at the tail end of the response by Hamas, it clearly says there will be a discussion about the pursuit of Palestinian nationalism that will include Hamas in it. Now, that's not only an obvious red line for Israel, but it's a stated red line from Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Foreign Minister Wong, who have said it hundreds of times that Hamas can have no role. Now, the dynamics between Israel and Australia are obviously different, and I would assume that the Israelis will be seeking some type of reassurances by America and also the Arab mediators that there is some pathway towards Hamas demilitarizing, but also not playing a role in those future in that future governance. Now, you can obviously see that there is not 100% approval by Hamas to the Trump plan. Now the pressure, and it's looking as though that he's up to it. Now the pressure is on Donald Trump to get to Arab states to pressure Hamas to get them to agree to the plan in its entirety. So within that, we see good things at the front end, and we hope and we pray that those hostages will be back in Israel over the coming week or so. But in terms of the intermediate and long term, I have grave concerns that Hamas will actually agree to the terms of the plan.
Well, look, I think the world's waiting with bated breath to see what happens out of those talks in Egypt and, of course, the subsequent follow-on from that. We mentioned earlier the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese took credit for Donald Trump's plan, saying that his decision to recognise Palestine at the UN gave the US president the positive momentum he needed to put a deal on the table. Joel, if the hostages are released, is it thanks to Anthony Albanese's government or in spite of them?
There are many words that I could use to describe the Prime Minister in this respect, but I'll try to provide my analysis as diplomatic as possible. The Prime Minister was nowhere near these talks. And what emphasises them clearly is that the President, in announcing the plan, and it's called the Trump Peace Plan, he called those countries and those leaders that had recently recognised the non-existent state of Palestine, and the quote was foolish. So at the press conference to announce the Trump Peace Plan, President Trump called Anthony Albanese and others foolish in their pursuit. So I don't think that someone who is named foolish by the guy who's named in the title of the peace plan can claim credit for it. Look, the fact of the matter is, and a lot can be said about this, is that the Prime Minister's statement afterwards to me, it appeared as though that he didn't even read the 20-point plan. His emphasis was entirely on the Palestinians and Palestinian statehood, which was not the premise of the plan. The premise of the plan was to end the war, to get the hostages back, to confirm no annexation or occupation of Gaza, to allow the Gazans to rebuild under a new interim government, along with a new international stabilization force. If I was a Gazan, they are the things that I would be concentrating on, not worrying about a symbolic recognition by a Western country of statehood, which I know as a Gazan that I don't have. The people of Palestine and the people in Gaza want this war to come to an end, and it would have been a little bit better had our Prime Minister focused on those elements of the plan than being obsessed by Palestinian statehood.
Joel, that was very, very well said. I want to talk to you about the planned pro-Palestine protest at the Sydney Opera House. Here was Labor's Industry Minister Tim Ayres today. Have a listen.
We want to see them do it in a respectful way that isn't about bringing conflict here to Australia.
Joel, he talks about not bringing a conflict here to Australia. Like I said earlier in the program, where's he been the last 2 years? Has he not seen what's happened week in and week out? The conflict is here already.
Well, you'd have to assume that Mr. Ayres and many of his Labor colleagues have been living under a rock for the past 2 years. But given his remarks today in the shadow of what's just occurred in the UK in Manchester, and given the fact that after 2 years, the Jewish community has been completely under siege by these protests, the fact is that I've got 2 young daughters and I cannot take them into downtown Melbourne on a Sunday. It's a complete no Jew zone, and it has been like that for the past 2 years. And what's really jarring about the rhetoric is that these protests have been known to support Hamas. They've been known to support slogans of Hamas, from the river to the sea, Khyber, Khyber al-Yahud. Hamas is a listed terror organization in this country, and we have ministers in our federal government 2 years after everything that we've endured here as Australian Jews, the firebombing of synagogues, the attacks on our institutions, the kicking out of Jews from safe spaces and other democratic areas. We have been completely under siege, and you have the minister claiming or requesting that the protesters remain peaceful. What I will note is the hypocrisy here. We all know in late August there are a number of protests around Australia, the March for Australia, where many Labor ministers requested for those rallies not to go ahead. So what is good for one is not good to the other in Labor, and it just reinforces the fact that regardless of the words that they will say that there is no place for anti-Semitism, this federal government is not taking the issue seriously. And the final cherry on that cake is it's been 3 months since the East Melbourne firebombing attack, where there were 22 people inside that building on a Sabbath. It's been 3 months since their own appointed envoy handed down the anti-Semitism report, and it's been 3 months of deafening silence by this federal government in response to that report. So we as Jews are at wit's end. We don't know what else we can do, and it doesn't seem as though that a terror attack directly related to the protest movements on the streets of UK is going to change the course of action by our federal government. And that's bitterly disappointing.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the anti-Semitism report has been sitting there now for months, and we're about to, witness the second anniversary of October 7, and still it's like we're back at square one. Joel, Burnie, nice to see you as always. Thanks very much for joining us on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.